Hey everyone! Ready to make those first impressions really count?
I think we all are.
Today, we're diving deep into Chris Fenning's The First Minute.
Oh, this is a good one.
It's all about how to make that first minute of any business interaction work for you, whether it's an email, a meeting, or even just a quick chat in the hallway.
I think most people underestimate just how much is riding on those first few moments.
Yeah, totally.
We sort of treat them as a formality.
Right.
But a strong start, it can really make or break an interaction, can it?
Absolutely. Think about those times you've walked into a meeting, you're all prepped and ready to go, but then you realize that everyone's kind of confused about what's even being discussed.
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time. It's like, didn't everyone get the memo?
Right. So frustrating.
Well, and Fenning argues that this often boils down to, well, poor framing. It's like you're starting a journey without a map.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
No one knows where they're going or how to get there.
Okay, so how do we avoid getting lost? What's the secret to framing things the right way?
Fenning has this really cool three-part structure he suggests: context, intent, and key message.
Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, it's about giving your audience a clear roadmap for the conversation. Set the stage and all that.
I get the context part, but what's the difference between intent and key message? Those sound kind of similar.
Great question. Context, that's all about grounding the conversation, making sure it's clear what project or topic you're talking about. Intent, that's different. That's where you explicitly state what you want the other person to do with the information.
Okay.
Are you looking for a decision?
Right.
Do you just need feedback, or are you simply giving an update? You see.
Yeah.
The key message, on the other hand, that's the core takeaway, like the headline of what you want them to remember.
Got it.
Does that clarify it a bit?
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's say I'm updating my team on, a couple of different projects. I might start by saying, all right, team, quick update today. We're covering Project Alpha. Need your input on the budget there. Then, on to Project Beta. Big news, folks. We've got a new timeline. So there, I'm giving context by naming the projects, right?
You got it.
Then the intent is clear because I'm telling them what I need from them for each one. And then I'd go on to lay out those key messages, like what's the issue with the alpha budget and what's the new timeline for beta?
Exactly. You're like giving your audience chapter headings so they know what to expect, they can follow along more easily, and it just keeps everyone on the same page. No one's asking questions about something you haven't even gotten to yet.
Right, and saves everyone time and frustration.
Exactly.
Okay, this framing thing is already making a lot of sense. But what about when you need to explain something complex,
Yeah.
Like pitching a new software system? There are tons of details to get into. How do you keep people engaged from the start without totally overwhelming them?
Well, that's where the power of structured summaries comes in. And Fenning has this great framework for it. It's called the GPS method. Goal, problem, solution.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more about this GPS method. How does that work?
All right, think of it like this. The goal is your destination.
Right.
What are you trying to achieve?
Right.
The problem, well, that's like the obstacle in your path. What's wrong with the current situation? Why do we need to change things up? And then finally, you have the solution, which is your proposed way to overcome that problem and get to the goal.
So instead of leading with all the problems in the existing software, I would say something like, all right, team, our goal is to improve efficiency by, let's say, 20%. The problem is our current software, it's outdated, can't handle the volume of transactions we're doing now. Our solution, implementing this new system, streamline our processes, and boost our capacity.
You nailed it.
Okay, cool.
You immediately capture their attention by focusing on the why, that goal, and the how, the solution. You framed it all around action outcomes instead of dwelling on the negative stuff.
It's funny because I think a lot of us, myself included, we fall into this trap of over-explaining things up front. Like we think we need to lay it all out before we get to the point, but that just backfires.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
It can lead to these rambling discussions that just lose people's interest.
Right.
The GPS method, though, it forces you to be concise, focused, and that just makes your message more powerful in the end.
I'm sold. I'm going to start using this GPS thing ASAP. But I'm curious, what about those quick, informal conversations? You bump into a colleague in the hallway. Do these principles still apply? It seems like it might be a bit much for a quick chat.
You'd be surprised how often those little chats turn into these huge time sucks.
Yeah.
And it's not even about our own time.
Right.
It's about respecting the other person's schedule, too, right?
Oh, I know. How many times have I asked someone, hey, you got a minute? And 10 minutes later, I realized I've totally hijacked their day. I cringe thinking about it.
We've all been there. That's why Fenning really emphasizes time checks. even in those casual interactions.
Okay, I like that.
And validation checkpoints.
So how do you do that without sounding overly formal?
A time check is easy.
Hey.
Just be upfront about how long you'll need.
Okay.
So instead of that vague, got a minute, try something like, hey, do you have like 2 minutes to quickly help me with something? It's about topic.
All right, yeah, that sets a clear expectation from the start. Now, what about the validation checkpoint? How and when do we use that?
Well, the validation checkpoint, that comes after you've briefly framed your topic. Using that context, intent, key message structure we discussed. It's about making sure you're talking to the right person and that they actually have the time to help you out. Are they the right person to be talking to?
Right.
And something as simple as, is this a good time? Or should I catch you later? Or do you have the bandwidth for this right now? That can go a long way.
It's like a little insurance policy to make sure you're not trapping someone in a conversation they don't have time for.
Yeah.
In the book, there's this great example of someone needing authorization for a spending request. And you might assume a certain colleague can give you the green light, but maybe they don't have the authority or they're totally swamped with other stuff.
Right. And these little checkpoints, they just help you avoid all that awkwardness.
It's about being respectful, understanding everyone's limitations, and really valuing their time.
Exactly. It's about realizing that communication isn't just about getting information across. It's about fostering that mutual understanding and respect.
Totally.
And honestly, it can make a world of difference in any interaction, big or small.
Okay, so we've covered framing, those structured summaries, and the importance of time checks and validation. I'm starting to feel like I have a whole new toolkit for handling any conversation, but I do have one more question.
Sure.
How do all of these techniques work across different platforms? Because it's not just face-to-face anymore, right?
Yeah. Right. We're constantly bombarded with messages these days.
Yeah.
Emails, instant messages, video calls, the list goes on and on.
So overwhelming.
The good news is these principles, they can be adapted to any format. And Fenning, he offers some specific tips for each channel.
Oh, let's get into those platform-specific strategies. First up, email. They can be a black hole of miscommunication. How can we make our emails stand out, get people to actually read them?
Okay, so think of your subject line as your framing tool. That's your first chance, sometimes your only chance, to grab the reader's attention. Make it specific, be informative, just like we were talking about earlier.
So instead of something vague like project update, it should be more like Product X, budget decision needed.
Now you're talking.
Gotcha.
You're immediately telling them what's up and what they need to do.
Yeah.
And then your opening line, it should echo that subject line and state your intent clearly.
So something like, hi, name, I'm writing to request your approval on the revised budget for Project X. The attached document outlines all the changes.
Perfect. You've given them the context, your intent, and you're guiding them to the supporting information. Fenning's also a big fan of bullet points in emails, and I totally get why. They make it so much easier to skim and digest information.
It's like those little visual cues,
Yeah.
breaking up those walls of text. It helps people find the information they need.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another communication platform, meetings. Meetings. They can be such a productivity killer if we're not careful.
Ugh, tell me about it. How do we make them less dreadful, more effective, maybe even, dare I say, enjoyable?
Clarity right from the start is key. That starts with the meeting invite itself. Instead of a generic subject line, like team meeting, try clearly stating the purpose and what you're hoping to achieve.
Okay, so instead of weekly marketing meeting, it would be something like marketing campaign brainstorm, generate 3 new ideas, or Project Z update, decision needed on next steps.
You got it. Setting expectations right from the beginning.
Love it. No more ambiguity. What about once the meeting actually starts? How do we keep things on track?
Fenning recommends starting with a quick recap of the meeting's purpose and desired outcome.
Okay.
You can even write it on a whiteboard, so it's up there for everyone to see.
A shared roadmap. Love it.
And just like with emails, bullet points are your friends here too. They break down complex information. You can use them to outline the agenda, summarize key points, whatever you need.
Visual organization. Got it.
Yeah.
He also suggests having a timekeeper, right?
Oh, yes.
So the facilitator's not constantly watching the clock.
Exactly. Helps everyone stay accountable to the schedule. No more going overtime.
Okay, emails and meetings covered. Now let's talk about presentations. When the spotlight's really on you,
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people get really nervous about presenting, and for good reason. It can be high pressure. How do you nail that first minute and really capture the audience?
Well, he suggests thinking of a presentation like you're a tour guide.
Ooh, okay.
You're the expert, leading them on a journey through this topic.
I like that. And just like a good tour guide, you start by orienting everyone. Let them know where you're going. Nobody wants to be dropped in the middle of a new city with no map and no idea where to go.
Right. So instead of launching straight into your slides, start by framing the presentation, that context, goal, and problem we were talking about.
Okay.
Tell them why this matters, what they'll gain from listening to you.
So even with a slideshow, you're having a conversation using those same framing techniques.
Exactly. It's about connecting with the audience, not just giving a data dump. Speaking of connecting, let's talk about the dreaded Q&A.
Yes, that can be so nerve-wracking. Any tips for handling those curveball questions with confidence?
He suggests having a few pre-prepared answers ready,
Oh, smart.
for common questions at least. That way you're not totally caught off guard.
Okay.
It's like having a few go-to stories or examples in your back pocket.
I need to work on that. I'm also guilty of rushing to answer before fully processing the question.
I get that. Well, Fenning suggests actually repeating the question back to the audience before you answer.
Oh, interesting.
Make sure everyone heard it, and it gives you a moment to gather your thoughts.
It's a small thing, but it can make you look so much more composed as a presenter.
Exactly. It's about being present and engaged, not just trying to speed through your slides.
Okay, we've
Yeah.
talked about emails, meetings, presentations. Now, what about those less formal channels, like instant messaging or texting? Do we need to be this structured even for those quick chats?
You know, it might seem like overkill, but even a quick message can benefit from clear intent and a brief summary. Think about how many times you've gotten a text that just says, "Hey, call me." You're left wondering, what's this about? Is it urgent?
Oh, I hate those vague texts.
Right. It's like, just tell me what you want. I don't have time to play guessing games.
Exactly.
So instead of sending a cryptic message, take a few seconds to provide some context. State your purpose clearly. It shows respect for the other person's time.
So instead of, can you look at this document, it's more like, hey, quick question. Can you look at this proposal and check the budget numbers? Need your feedback by end of day.
Much better.
Okay, cool.
You've given context, intent, and a time frame. No ambiguity.
I think sometimes we underestimate the power of those small details. You know, it's just a quick text, but they can really impact our relationships and our productivity.
Absolutely. Every interaction, no matter how small, it's a chance to build trust,
Right.
strengthen connections. And that's especially important for those more challenging communication situations, like when you need to escalate an issue or have a difficult conversation with someone.
Ooh, yeah. Those tough conversations can be so hard. It's so easy to let things spiral out of control. How can we keep them productive?
That's where these framing techniques are even more important. If we structure our communication thoughtfully, we can actually prevent those conversations from becoming unproductive arguments.
Yeah. So instead of getting all worked up and attacking the person, you take a deep breath and frame the conversation in a way that focuses on solutions, not blame.
Exactly. Fenning talks about acknowledging the problem without pointing fingers.
Okay.
So instead of "you messed this up," it's more like, "we've hit a snag with Project X, the deadline got moved up, and we're not going to be able to deliver on time with the current resources. Let's talk about how we can address this challenge together."
So you're acknowledging the problem, but framing it as a shared challenge to overcome.
Exactly. Now, instead of just listing all their shortcomings, use that GPS method to keep it objective
Right.
and solution-oriented.
Okay, so I might say our goal is to deliver high-quality work on time and on budget. The problem is that we've been missing deadlines, and that's pushing back the project timeline. I'd like to brainstorm some solutions with you. Maybe we adjust the workload or clarify expectations or just provide some extra support.
Now you're talking. You've laid out the situation clearly, framed the conversation around finding solutions together, and remember, in these situations, validation checkpoints are crucial.
You mean make sure the other person feels heard and understood?
Exactly. You could say something like, "Does that make sense?" or "Do you have any thoughts or suggestions?"
Yeah.
It shows that you're not just lecturing, you actually care about their perspective.
These techniques are amazing. I'm starting to see how they can transform even the toughest conversations into opportunities for growth and better collaboration. But not every conversation is going to be some high-stakes presentation or difficult feedback session, right?
Right.
What about those everyday interactions? Asking a colleague for a favor, clarifying a project detail.
Well, those seemingly small interactions, they're the foundation of good teamwork and strong relationships. And yes, these principles can make a huge difference even in those quick exchanges.
Okay, good to know.
Let's say you need to ask a colleague to cover a meeting for you. Instead of a quick text saying, hey, can you cover my 2 p.m.? You could frame it more thoughtfully.
How so?
Try, hey, name, I have a scheduling conflict and need someone to cover my 2 p.m. on topic. Would you be free? It should only take about an hour.
Wow, that's so much more professional and respectful. It shows you value their time.
Right. And even in a text or email, you can use those bullet points to make the information easier to digest.
So it's all about being clear, concise, and respectful.
You got it.
But what about when you have to push back or disagree with someone? How do you do that without damaging the relationship?
That's where framing is especially important. Instead of just saying, I disagree, you frame it in a way that acknowledges the other person's perspective, but also expresses your own.
So let's say a colleague suggests an approach that you think is too risky. Instead of shutting them down, you might say something like, I appreciate your suggestion and I see how it could work, but I'm a bit concerned about state your concerns. Maybe we could brainstorm some alternative options that would mitigate those risks.
Perfect. You've acknowledged their idea, voiced your concerns, and proposed a collaborative solution.
Turning a potential conflict into a productive dialogue.
Exactly.
It's not about winning, it's about building trust and understanding, even when you disagree.
It's about recognizing that every interaction, even those small ones, is a chance to strengthen our connections, make our work environment more positive and productive.
I feel so much more equipped to handle any communication challenge that comes my way. It's like we've been given a secret decoder ring for human
I
interaction.
love that.
But you know what? I think it's time for us to give our listeners a chance to process all this amazing information.
Agreed.
Let's pause here for a moment and give everyone a moment to reflect on what we've covered so far.
We'll be back in a flash. You know, it's amazing how much more confident we feel when we have a framework for these tricky situations. It's like having a secret weapon, right?
Yeah, it's like we've been given this code to unlock better relationships and get things done.
Exactly. And the best part is, it doesn't require a whole personality makeover or anything.
Right.
Just small tweaks to how we approach our interactions.
Okay, so we've talked about framing, structured summaries, those checkpoints. I want to see it in action. Can we walk through some real-world scenarios, where these principles can really make a difference?
Absolutely. Let's start with something you're probably working on right now. That big presentation you have coming up.
Oh, man. Don't remind me. I'm already getting nervous just thinking about it.
Well, instead of letting those nerves take over, let's reframe this presentation as a chance to shine.
Okay. I like the sound of that.
Imagine you're presenting to potential investors for your new business idea. Got the picture?
All right. Got it. A room full of skeptical faces. The pressure is on.
Now, instead of diving right into the technical details, paint a picture of the problem you're solving.
Okay.
Start with something like, think about the last time you were frustrated trying to insert a relatable problem your product solves. You've immediately got their attention because it's a shared experience.
Okay, yeah. I can feel the energy shifting. They're nodding along. They've been there. So what's next?
Now you introduce the goal, that positive outcome, what your product delivers. You could say, imagine a world where positive impact is a reality. That's the world we're creating. Now they're starting to see the value.
Okay, they're hooked.
Yeah.
They want to know how we get to this amazing new world. This is usually where I'd start rambling about all the features and benefits. But I have a feeling you're going to steer me in a different direction.
You got it. Instead of getting lost in the weeds, try this. And here's how we're making that vision a reality. Boom. Simple, clear, compelling.
Oh, I love that. It's like a movie trailer, just enough to get them interested, and now they want to see the whole film.
Exactly. You're building anticipation. You've got a narrative, a story they want to be a part of. And now you can strategically sprinkle in those details, knowing you have their attention.
Okay, feeling much better about this presentation already. But let's switch gears. What about those everyday conversations that feel like minefields? Like those tricky ones where emotions run high. What about giving someone difficult feedback?
Oh, those are never easy. But these techniques can really help you approach them with confidence and compassion. So let's say you've got a team member who's consistently missing deadlines.
Right.
Instead of being accusatory, use framing to set a more collaborative tone.
So instead of you're letting the team down with these missed deadlines, what would be a better way to frame it?
You could try something like, I've noticed we've had some challenges meeting recent deadlines on project name. I'd like to talk about how we can work together to get back on track.
Yeah.
You've acknowledged the issue, but without placing blame. And you've signaled that you want to find a solution together.
I can already feel the tension going down. It's not about attacking them. It's a team effort.
Exactly. Now, instead of listing everything they're doing wrong, use the GPS method.
Oh, yeah.
Keeps the conversation focused on solutions.
So I might say our goal is to deliver high-quality work on time and on budget. The problem is we've been missing deadlines, and it's impacting the project timeline. So I'd like to brainstorm some solutions together. Maybe we adjust the workload, clarify expectations, provide extra support, something like that.
Perfect. You've laid out the situation clearly. It's a conversation about solutions, and don't forget those validation checkpoints.
Making sure they feel heard and understood.
That's it. You might say, does that make sense? Do you have any thoughts? You're not just talking at them. You're genuinely interested in what they have to say.
It's amazing how these techniques can turn even the toughest conversations into opportunities for growth.
That's the goal.
But let's be real, not every conversation is going to be a high-stakes presentation or a difficult feedback session. What about those quick asks or just clarifying a project detail?
Those everyday interactions, they matter. They're how we build those strong relationships and make teamwork actually work. And these principles, they can make a world of difference, even in those little exchanges. So let's say you need to ask a colleague to cover a meeting. Instead of a quick text, hey, can you cover my 2 p.m.? You can use framing to make it clearer, more respectful.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, how would you rephrase that?
Try this. Hey, name, I have a scheduling conflict and need someone to cover my 2 p.m. on topic. Would you be available? It should only take about an hour. See?
Wow, that sounds so much better. It shows that you're not just taking their time for granted.
Right. And remember, even in a quick text or email, you can use bullet points to make the information super easy to digest.
Clarity, conciseness, and respect, those are the keys.
You got it.
But what about those times when you have to disagree with someone? Push back a little. How do you do that without things getting messy?
That's where framing becomes your best friend. Instead of just saying, I disagree, you acknowledge their perspective while expressing your own.
So let's say a colleague wants to take an approach that you think is too risky. Instead of shooting it down, you might say, I appreciate your suggestion and I can see how that could work, but I'm a little concerned about state your concerns. Maybe we could explore a few other options that would reduce those risks.
Perfect example. You acknowledged their idea, shared your concerns without being confrontational, and proposed a collaborative solution.
Turning a potential conflict into a productive chat. This is great. You know, what's really clicking for me is that these techniques, they're not about winning an argument or getting your own way.
Exactly.
It's about building trust and understanding, even when you have different opinions.
Right. It's recognizing that every interaction, no matter how small, it's a chance to strengthen those connections, create a more positive environment where people can really do their best work.
I'm feeling so much more ready to handle whatever comes my way. It's like you said, it's like having a secret decoder ring for communication.
I love that analogy.
But, you know, I think it's time we let our listeners digest all this.
You're right.
Let's pause here and give everyone a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed so far.
It's amazing, isn't it, how much more in control you feel when you have these tools to help you communicate better.
It's like having a cheat sheet for those tricky conversations.
Exactly. And what I love about these techniques is that they're not about tricking anyone or being someone you're not.
Right.
It's all about being more genuine, more intentional with how you communicate.
Being your best self, but like with a strategy.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like communication. It's a skill we can all learn and get better at. And the more we use these techniques, the more natural they become.
Right. Totally. It's like learning a new dance move. At first, it feels awkward, but then you practice, and it's like second nature.
I love that. And like with any new skill, just start small. Pick one or two that really resonate with you. Start using them every day. You don't have to do it all at once.
Great advice. Speaking of trying things out, I'd love to hear from our listeners. What are some real-world situations where you've struggled with communication? Maybe giving tough feedback, asking for a raise, dealing with a conflict.
We'd love to hear your stories. Share them with us on social media, and we'll offer some advice on how to use these techniques.
We're all in this together, learning from each other, becoming more confident communicators.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making that effort to improve.
Right.
Every interaction is a chance to practice and grow.
I love that. Every interaction is a chance. It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And by being curious and open to learning, we can really change our relationships, our careers, our lives even.
This has been such a great deep dive. We covered so much, from how to structure what we say to handling those tough talks with grace.
And honestly, we've only scratched the surface. Fenning's book, The First Minute, it's packed with so many more great insights.
It's definitely worth checking out.
Absolutely.
But for now, we're going to wrap things up. But before we go, one final thought.
Remember, every interaction matters. Choose your words carefully. Communicate with intention. And you'll see your relationships and your results transform.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing and make those first minutes count.